Hey guys, Cameron for Better Call Saul, Season 2, Episode 5, Rebecca, and I was definitely looking forward to this episode. Last week's episode especially, I was very interested in seeing how things would play out. I knew things were going to get worse, but, with this show, that's when it's at its best. It's when it's tragic, and this episode really was tragic, especially since most of it, we focused on Kim. This really was Kim's episode, and they did a very good job with that, showing what she has to endure. There are some truly tragic scenes this episode, really, but let's just get into this episode. We had a really nice mic supply, and a really awesome closing scene. We'll get into that definitely, but let's get into this episode. Once again, very much like last week, kind of showing the mistakes Jimmy's made and how he's not going to get out of it. The difference is, while last week's focused on Jimmy himself, this one focused a lot more on Kim, and we'll get into that. But I really did like the beginning of this episode, which was a flashback and also shows why the name of this episode is called Rebecca. Because we knew that there was someone named Rebecca Boyes. We knew that from Chuck's sheet music. We just didn't know who she was. And it turns out that this was Chuck's wife. She was a professional violinist and so respected by her peers that Yo-Yo Ma came to her wedding, which is very interesting. And basically, we see that Chuck drops this when Jimmy is coming to visit after Chuck got Jimmy out of the Chicago sunroof trouble. And during a dinner in which all three seem very nervous and make forced conversation, it's a very intense situation because when Jimmy arrives, Chuck warns, Rebecca that, hey, my brother, he's very different. Don't expect him to be very weird and things like that. He's, very mean-spirited and things like that. But she is very impressed by him. Like, Jimmy's really impressing her. He's saying all these jokes and things. And Chuck had already arranged with Rebecca that they would tug their ear if either of them wanted to end the night early. But when Rebecca meets him, right away they connect. He compliments her cooking, tells Chuck he's lucky to be married to such a talented woman and skilled chef, and it's clear that Jimmy's just trying to impress them. That's what he's doing. He's doing what he does best. He's just throwing comments at them. Even if he doesn't mean it, he's just trying to be nice. And he tells Chuck he's lucky to be married to such a talented woman and skilled chef. And then as they drink glasses of wine, Jimmy drinks a bottle of the beer that he brought for Chuck. And Jimmy tells him about his first week in the mailroom at HHM. And he's met some nice people, including one person he doesn't know, which we're to assume this person is Kim, because what other girl would there be that he's working with at HHM that he doesn't know very well? And he's learning to use a complicated Xerox machine. He's heard about 100 lawyer jokes, which he proceeds to share with Chuck and Rebecca, and Rebecca's just loving it. She's thinking that they're very clever and things like that, and Chuck is unamused and begins tugging on his ear. Rebecca doesn't see it, though, and even after Chuck tries to interrupt Jimmy's flow with the offer of blueberry crumble dessert, the jokes continue. In fact, Rebecca's asking Jimmy who Chuck had warned her is an acquired taste to tell her more jokes and offers one up herself, which is very interesting the way this was done. Even at the dinner table, you can tell that Jimmy's winning over Chuck. This is just something he does very well. He knows how to flatter people, and he knows how to get people on his side. It doesn't sound as crazy as it is, but that's what Jimmy does. He manipulates people, and that's exactly what he's doing with Rebecca. And Rebecca's too busy being charmed by Jimmy to notice anything because Chuck keeps tugging on his ear, but again, Rebecca's not noticing. So at bedtime, Chuck and Rebecca are each laying on the respective sides of the bed, and she tells him that Jimmy's great, which I found that interesting that they don't sleep in one bed, they sleep in separate beds. It makes sense because of Chuck's condition, things like that, but this is really before that whole thing started. And she tells him that Jimmy's great. She doesn't know why he was worried. Chuck tells his own lawyer joke, and at first, she doesn't even realize it's a joke, and she doesn't really laugh at it. She just chuckles and she doesn't really think it was funny and returns to her magazine. And again, like I said, you can really tell that Chuck does not have what Jimmy does. He doesn't have the way to present things. He's not as, he doesn't really have, showmanship. What Jimmy always says is like showmanship. He wouldn't just run a commercial. He wouldn't do that sort of thing. And it really shows the contrast between Chuck and Jimmy and why people prefer Jimmy over Chuck, because Jimmy is just good at persuading and Jimmy's good at presenting things, and that's why Jimmy's going to be such a great lawyer when he turns into Saul. Chuck, on the other hand, is very formal and just very cynical about, well, not really cynical, but he's just very, calm and things like that. And Rebecca loves him, obviously, but you can tell why that really didn't work. Obviously, Rebecca liked what Jimmy was doing. She didn't understand why Chuck didn't like him, and it's interesting to see definitely the way that was done. So, very good way to start the episode. I definitely like the way they handled that. And a very important flashback. Like, it really shows why Chuck and Jimmy are the way they are today. So we see Jimmy's working late at the Davis and Main offices. He prints a copy of the document he was working on, and his associate Erin is basically like the Tracy Flick of Davis and Main. She catches up with him at the printer with a full agenda, and you can tell right away that she's here to keep watch of him. And we know that makes sense, because obviously Cliff said, look, you're on thin ice with us, you get one more strike, you're just gone. That's how it's going to be. So this girl is basically going to watch him very carefully, make sure that he's doing the right thing, and she tells him that she finished a soda can out of his office trash can because they recycle it at Davis and Maine, and there's a special receptacle for those, and she wants to go over a brief with him, a document that features at least 24 colored flags, and I gotta say, I love this character of Erin. I mean, she really pushes a lot of boundaries. She doesn't really seem to have boundaries, but she's very funny. She had some nice humor, and she also really adds a good conflict here because now Jimmy knows that she's watching him, and he has to keep very careful watching what he does. And because we realize that he hasn't followed things like centering Roman numerals and using 2 spaces after each period, which is very interesting. Again, Jimmy's doing things the way he wants to. That's how he's always done things. But that's what's going to cause his downfall. That's what's going to cause him to end up working as a janitor because he's going to do his own things, and it's going to put him in a very bad position, and it's going to get him fired. And Jimmy asks her why a second-year associate would be advising a 4th year like himself, and figures out that Cliff had assigned her to babysit him after the TV commercial incident. And Erin wants to go over the brief with Jimmy, and though he thinks he can wait until the morning, she's annoyingly persistent, so he agrees, and then of course slips out of the office while she's waiting for him, and he obviously wants nothing to do with her. He doesn't think he needs her help. He doesn't even think he needs her. And then we get a scene that very much shows the way Jimmy is now. I mean, it's just a really important scene. We see he arrives at HHM with the document in his hand, which he slides in front of Kim, who's staying late to work off her penance in the doc review room. And we know that Kim's position, she's on thin ice with Hamlin. Hamlin thinks that she's the one that told Jimmy to run a commercial, and he does not know, of course, Hamlin didn't know that she knew that he ran it, without Cliff's consent. He didn't know about that. So obviously he's really upset with Kim, and she's trying to fix her position there. And Jimmy says that this is how they're going to handle the travesty of justice, but she's not sharing his vision. And she asks him straight out, do you want me to sue my own firm? Because obviously this is her firm that she works at. She shouldn't just sue them. But that's what Jimmy's telling her to do. He's saying, look, just sue them, and then that's fine. But what does she have to sue them for? They didn't do anything wrong. Her firm had nothing to do with it. He's basically telling her, look, cop out and serve and sue them. That way you look good. That way, one, you look good. No one will think you did anything wrong. But all that does is do what Jimmy does. And it's clear that Kim does not want to be like Jimmy. And I really like seeing that. I really like seeing the contrast between these two. And Jimmy tells her this isn't her fault and it isn't about her performance. It's just Chuck's way of getting to him. That's really all this was. And she tells him that he's wrong. This is about Hamlin trying to upload his image. He did the same thing after the Kettleman situation, and Chuck wasn't even around then. So this has nothing to do with Chuck. This is who Jimmy is, but Jimmy insists that Chuck is behind it. And you can tell, I think, that Jimmy feels a little, not scared, but what's the word I'm looking for? I can't think of the word, but he definitely feels a little threatened, that's the word. He feels threatened by Chuck. He really feels like Chuck's out to get him, which we know he's not, especially in a very important conversation he has with Kim a little bit later in the episode. But it's clear that Jimmy thinks that Chuck is the one that's doing all this stuff to him, and Kim knows that that's really not the case. And she says that he's the one behind this, that she told him this would happen, and now that she's paying the price, she should have known better, and now she's keeping her head down and getting through this. And she's most certainly not suing HHM. Even if she wins, who would hire her, that would be career suicide. And I definitely do agree with her that would definitely be career suicide. I mean, that's saying, look, I'm going to sue my firm and lose my job and then have nowhere to go. And that's what Jimmy's telling her to do. And I don't really think Jimmy's thinking that through. I don't think Jimmy's intentionally trying to be a dick here. I just don't think he's really thinking this through. And Jimmy then gives her this situation that really is not going to work at all. I mean, what he's saying to her is very sexist, and he says that he's going to quit Davis and Maine because that will get her out of Dutch, and this is about Chuck. He insists whether she believes her or not, and she says that, she's like, wow, my knight in shining armor. She says quitting a job that he's been trying to tank since day one. She digged herself out of this hole, and he's done his job. Prove that he can go 1 week, 1 day without breaking the rules of the New Mexico Bar Association or pissing off his boss. And don't insult her intelligence by saying he isn't doing any of this for her. And to just leave her be, show that he can do this. He doesn't have to screw things up because Jimmy to her is a screw up. That's all he's done. He's screwed things up, and she wants to see that he's capable of doing something the way it's supposed to be done because that's not what he does. He does things wrong, and obviously Kim is really pissed about that, which she has every right to be, definitely, but I really like the way that was handled. And she just tells him, look, just please go. And like I've said before, I mean, Jimmy and Kim, you can tell this episode, they're really getting, they're really on the verge, I think, of breaking up. They're going to break up very soon. I don't see them lasting that much longer, especially since this is the halfway point of the season, and we're already halfway point of the season. They're already like each other's throats. I can see them breaking up very quickly, definitely. I don't think this is going to last that much longer, I have to say. And it sucks because I really do like Jimmy and Kim. It's just, they can never be together. That's the problem. They can never be together, and it's not because Jimmy, isn't, capable of having someone in his life. It's the fact that Jimmy can't be trusted. He's going to do his own thing, and it's only for his benefit. He really doesn't think it through for everyone else, and everything he wants isn't going to happen the way he wants it to, which is really interesting. So, Aaron's then waiting in Jimmy's office the next morning and isn't buying that GERD issues led him to run out on her the previous night. They work on legal brief edits, then she drives him to the courthouse where he tries to secure a same-week date on the hearing calendar. The court clerk, the one who loves to tell him no, lest he proffers a Beanie Baby for her on duty, and she isn't swayed again until he pulls a beanie out of his case, and Aaron snatches it back just as the clerk's about to take it, dressing down Jimmy for trying to bribe the clerk, and he says that that's how it's done, but Aaron isn't having it, and gets a court date a month away, so definitely she doesn't trust him, you can tell, and it's understandable. I mean, that's why she's here to watch over him. So Jimmy goes to the bathroom with Aaron waiting right outside, runs into Bill, a very important scene here. We see Bill's a DA who's envious of all the perks that Jimmy's getting at Davis and Maine, and way more appreciative of them than Jimmy is, because Jimmy doesn't seem to really appreciate what he's doing. It doesn't really seem like he's happy about it. We see a new car, that he's got one, and Jimmy says, and then immediately starts to bring up the cup holders, how the cup holders won't hold the mug that Kim gave him, and is just focusing on the negatives. He's not focusing on the positives, and that's something that Jimmy does. He always complains, and that's something that really pisses him off. And Bill has vomit on his lapel, which could be courtesy of two different clients, he says, and tells Jimmy he has to go off to a case with some brain-dead suckwad who tried to rob a library. So you can tell that Bill's in a much worse situation than Jimmy. Jimmy he ran a commercial. That's his problem, and he's really making a huge deal about it, and it's really not as big as a deal as he thinks it was, and his job itself is really good. I mean, you can tell that Bill is jealous of him for it, and it's very interesting to see the way that's done, but Jimmy just always gets his way because he's just very good at doing that sort of thing. So then we see this great montage with Kim. I love the way that this was done. Very similar to Jimmy's montage in episode 2, where we see how he plans out his day and the things he does to work out a case and things like that, if you remember in season 1. Very much like that, but with Kim, very well done here, because Kim pretty much has to do this on her own. She realizes that she's on her own, she needs to prove her worth to Hamlin, and then she can stay. So she stays working in the doc review dungeon, spends her lunch hours contacting literally anyone she can. Friends, colleagues, fellow University of New Mexico alumni, and people she's met professional mixers to try to drum up new businesses for the firm. And after countless calls and queries, she finally gets a return call from a mixer connection who wants to set up a meeting about HHM representing bank chain Mesa Verde. And just her reaction here, her just screaming like a schoolgirl. I mean, you can tell that this is one of the happiest things that's happened to her in a while. She did this on her own. She was able to get a call, and she can stay. She knows that she's no longer in jeopardy and that this is going to go well, and I just felt so happy for Kim. It's tragic because Jimmy can't help her or anything, and she did this all on her own, but it's still amazing to see, and I'm very happy that worked out. So the meeting goes well, and when the Mesa Verde reps leave HMM, it's clear that Kim has landed an important new client for the firm, and Kim congratulates Hamlin, he congratulates her, and then he tells her a coworker will be assigned to a case because she has enough on her plate in doc review, and obviously she's really upset because she really was hoping this could be her chance, that she could finally get to do what she wanted to do. Finally she get to do something on her own, but there are just other people that Hamlin thinks are better than her. And it's clear that Hamlin's upset with her. Like, Hamlin, we know, has always not really trusted Kim. We definitely see that that's going on. But it's really sad because the fact that she worked so effortlessly to try and, find them someone to represent or just try to do something to turn herself around, it's not working the way she wants it to, and it's very similar to what Jimmy's doing. Jimmy has things that he wants to do. Kim's just looking at it a lot more realistically. That's really how it is. Kim looks at it realistically. Jimmy doesn't look at anything realistically, and I think it's very interesting the way they're handling that. So, very sad, definitely. But then we get this really great scene with Chuck, Hamlin, and Kim. I really like this. Hamlin goes to Chuck's house with some celebratory liquor and shares the good news about Mesa Verde. Chuck assumes that Hamlin snagged a new client during a gold outing, and Hamlin admits that it was Kim who brought them in, and it'll mean $250,000 worth of billings, Chuck points out, which will take months, maybe years, and he assumes this gets Kim out of the doghouse, and Hamlin says that we'll see. So I like that Chuck is trying to help her here. He's basically doing what Jimmy's not. Jimmy's just doing things that help him. He's not really focused on helping Kim, and it's clear that Chuck is focused on that. So the next morning, very early, the HMM offices are prepped for Chuck's arrival. He works via lantern light, and when he runs into Kim in the office, she's been there all night. He asks her to make coffee. He can't because, of course, electricity. And he tells her to make 2 cups, and when she brings him into his office, they chat. He makes a small, painful attempt at a joke, and Kim asks him if she can ask him a question, which I love the way that was done. That's why we got that first scene, because we can see that he's really bad at telling jokes, and he's not good at that kind of thing like Jimmy is. So she wants to know if she, and I love the question she asks. Probably one of the most devastating quotes we've heard on this show. I mean, there have been many sad things that we've heard, but this is probably the most, honestly, probably the most devastating quote I've heard all season, because she says straight out, "Do I have a future at this firm?" That's what she says. And it's tragic. It really is. I mean, she thought that this could turn herself around, and she's still in the same place as she was. Hamlin is furious with her. He's not going to forgive her, and Chuck tells us they have a lot in common. Jimmy left her holding the bag, and she's not the first person to go out on a limb for him, and he says that he made the same mistake over and over. He then tells her about his dad. Now, this is really interesting. We find out something about their dad here. His dad, he says, was a personification of good. He owned a little corner store in Syracuse, singing everything into the business to fulfill his dream being his own boss. And after years of working for other people, he was beloved in the neighborhood, knew everyone's name, and when Chuck went away to college, Jimmy started working there. And Jimmy, and their father wasn't the savviest businessman. However, when Chuck came home to help him figure out the books, he discovered a 14,000 was just gone, pilfered in drips and drabs from the cash register by Jimmy. Their dad wouldn't believe that Jimmy had done that, and shortly thereafter had to sell the business, and he died 6 months later, and no one cried harder than Jimmy at the funeral, Chuck says, because Jimmy felt this was his fault, and Jimmy knew that. And I like what he tells Kim here, because again, it shows that he does have that concern. He says straight out, his brother's not a bad person, that he has a good heart, he can't help himself, and everyone's left picking up the pieces. And he asks if there's more coffee, and then gets up to go get it himself. And as he walks away, he turns back and tells her that he'll talk to Hamlin, pour a little oil in troubled waters, she'll be wasted down in dock review, and he says good job with Mesa Verde. He thinks that she did a good thing. He's really giving her the compliments and the help that she needs that Jimmy's not giving her, which I find very interesting, definitely. And honestly, I could see Chuck and Kim getting together. I really could. Just the way that this is going, the way Chuck's trying to help her out, I could honestly see these two getting together. And I mean, I don't know if the show would go in that direction, but just the way that Chuck cares about her, I could definitely see that happening. And it's very interesting. And we don't really know. I mean, is this, possibly his revenge for what happened with Rebecca? Because he was very much in the same situation with Rebecca, where, he had this wife that he sort of connected with, and then Jimmy kind of ruined things. So is it about that kind of? I mean, it's very interesting the way this was going, and I definitely like the way that was handled, and I'm definitely interested in seeing where we're going to go from here, because this is very interesting. I can't wait to see where that goes. Let's get to the Mike part of this episode, because there was some great scenes with Mike in this episode, but there wasn't a whole lot with Mike, because as you can tell, it's very focused on Kim. We only really had a few scenes with Mike here. We did get some really good stuff, but not a lot here. We find out right away that Mike has helped Stacee and Kaylie relocate. They're saying it now. How? I don't know, because he only had half the money. I guess Nacho just let him have it. Maybe, I don't know, maybe he paid them half. I don't really know. But they're staying at a residential hotel that has a pool that Kaylie loves, but she misses her grandfather, who hasn't visited her lately because of his bruised face, and he's telling them that he got it from a car accident. And they're going to find out at some point that this wasn't a car accident. He's lying to them right now, saying that, oh, this was a car accident, but, they got to find out at some point. This definitely is not a car accident. There's definitely more going on there, and we'll have to see what happens there, because definitely very interesting with that. I definitely mentioned seeing what's going to happen with that. So, the last scene in this episode, though, was just awesome. I love the way this was done. Mike is eating breakfast at the local diner when someone comes in, and that person is none other than Tio Salamanca, who, of course, is in Breaking Bad. Now, I don't know this character, but I heard he's very important to the show, and he is Tuco's grandfather, as we know. So, he's walking and talking before whatever illness puts him in a wheelchair, and he tells Mike he really did a number on him, and Mike reminds that Mike, I love the way that Mike's like, sorry, do I know you? Because right away he just starts talking, and Tio explains that he's Tuco's uncle, and that Tuco has always been a hothead. He fancies himself a boxer too, and Tio tells Mike that he should have shown him respect. He's not upset that Mike was hurt. He's not upset about that at all. He's not upset that Mike beat up Tuco. He thinks that he did the right thing, and that Tuco should have respected him, because Mike probably wouldn't have beat the shit out of him if Tuco hadn't respected him. And he tells Mike that he apologizes, and Mike says apology accepted. And Tio goes on to say Tuco should go to jail for assaulting Mike, not for 8 years, which is the sentence he's facing, though. It should be less than that. And he asks if he knows what he's getting at, and Mike says not really. And Tio wants Mike to say the gun cops found on Tuco, the thing that's boosting his sentence, is really his. And Mike says that he'd be subject to a gun charge. And Tio says that telling him cops would go easier on him, seeing as how he's a former cop, and Mike asks if he's a psychic, and Tio says he's just looking for the best possible outcome for everyone. He'll even make Tuco apologize to Mike and give Mike $5,000 for his troubles, and he tells him to think about it, laying a $20 bill on the table, walking out of the restaurant, and Mike gets a look that suggests he knew he was making a mistake getting involved in the Tuco and Nacho business, because now he's really got his hands tied, because now he has this offer that he really can't refuse, and he kind of went full Godfather with that. I mean, really, he did. He basically told him, look, you got this offer, and if you don't take it, it's going to end up really badly for you, and Tuco will probably kill him. I mean, obviously, Tuco's not going to kill him, because here's the thing. We know Mike is going to survive and end up in Better Call Saul. We know that's going to happen. We knew Tuco wasn't going to die either, and that's the one thing the show can't do. It can't really surprise us in that, because we know that they're going to survive. But the show doesn't need to be suspenseful in that sense. The show's suspenseful more in choices, and that's really something that Mike has to do. Mike, like I said, really has his hands tied now, because on one hand, he doesn't want to be involved in this business, but on the other hand, he does want to do the right thing. And he knows that, maybe helping out Tuco is the right thing to do. Maybe maybe Tuco will help him out or something, but very interesting the way it's going on. And Kaylie and Stacey and if that happens, Kaylie and Stacey are definitely going to find out that that's really what happened, that it wasn't just a car accident, because right now he's saying it was a car accident, and he even sees Jimmy in the episode and says it was a car accident. Like, he's telling everyone that. He's pretty much ashamed of what happened with Nacho and Tuco, which I can understand. I mean, Nacho literally said kill Tuco, and he didn't. You can tell why he feels regret about that, because he really didn't want to be involved in the first place. And remember, the only reason he did this was to help out Kaylie and Stacey. That's the only reason he really got involved in this job. So, very interesting the way that's being handled. I really like the way they're going with that. But let's talk about Jimmy, because I feel so bad for Jimmy and Kim. We know that their relationship is probably going to be over soon. Is Chuck going to be able to help Kim? I mean, it seems like he genuinely wants to help her. But is this also kind of payback for what Jimmy did to him and Rebecca? You have to think about that, because he still has those bad memories of what happened between him and Rebecca. You have to think that maybe he still holds a bit of a grudge against Jimmy, even though he says my brother's not a bad person. He still probably does hold a bit of a grudge and think, you know what, this is the man that ruined my relationship. Maybe I should go after him, try to fix things. Very interesting the way that that's being handled. I like the way they're doing that. But does Kim really have a future? I mean, I do agree with her. Does she really have a future? Is this really going to work? Is there anything she can do to not be fired? Because I honestly don't know at this point if there's anything she can do. I mean, that's really interesting what's going to happen with that. And definitely the way that Jimmy's acting as well, I really think is very interesting. Because the way that Jimmy's acting, I mean, he really doesn't think he's doing anything wrong. He thinks he's doing the right thing, and someone really needs to be there to put him in the right direction. And there's really no one at this point. I feel like that encounter with Bill didn't even really do anything. It really shows that Jimmy's becoming more and more like that Saul personality, and we'll have to see what happens there, because that overall is really interesting, and the way it's going on. Oh, by the way, the Jimmy and Mike scene, he actually doesn't know what happened. He just said the first rule of Fight Club. Like, he didn't actually say what's going on there, so that's very interesting. We now know that Jimmy has to face a court law and everything, so that's going to be really complicated, what's going on with that, and he now has his court date, so very interested in seeing where that's going to go. Jimmy's position, we know, is at risk. I do like Erin, though, because she's basically just doing her job. She's being very stalkerish, kind of, but that's her job, and I like seeing that. Definitely interested with that dynamic as well. But overall, guys, amazing episode. Definitely really love this episode. Kim especially, I feel so bad for. I mean, she really, out of everyone, I think is in the worst position. She has to do all this stuff on her own. She has a boyfriend that's not very supportive of her. Like, he really is just looking out for himself, and he's not really doing much for her that benefits her. Like, I think in his mind, he's kind of helping her, but his, look at life is unrealistic, and it's not going to happen, and he really needs to think about what is going to happen, because what he thinks is going to to happen is now what's going to happen. I'd probably say best episode of the season. I really would. The problem is every week is better than the last, and I can't really say best episode of the season. So I'm going to say this was definitely one of the best episodes of the season because every episode of the season has been amazing. There has been a single episode I haven't loved, but we are now at the halfway point of the season. Where do you guys think the rest of the season is going to go? I absolutely loved this episode. Love to hear your thoughts, and I will see you guys in my next video, which will be for the season finale of Pretty Little Liars, and I will see you guys for which I know you guys can't wait for, and I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.